I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we're going to be talking about Gossip Girl season 4. So season 4 of Gossip Girl I thought was incredibly entertaining and pretty well designed. And if you've been keeping track, I I still think it's the best teen drama I've ever seen. Season 4, I don't think it's as perfect or as mesmerizing as the first 3 seasons, but that's because I, I, I think in order for this show to continue, it had to regroup, had to like reform itself. Um, it had to do a few compositionally counterintuitive things to keep the series progressing. And I think that Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, the creators and showrunners of Gossip Girl, I think they pulled it off beautifully. When I say counterintuitive things, I kind of mean that we've been taught a formula by Gossip Girl, because Gossip Girl is a show that's obsessed with the idea of narratives, and more specifically with the meta narrative, with how those narratives are expressed, with its own context. The show insists upon its own expressions, upon its own forms of narrative. And the characters manipulate that narrative, manipulate the meta narrative. They try to game it. They try to use it to further their own ideas of design, for their own lives, for their own interiority, for their own gain. We've been taught a formula by Gossip Girl because narrative always has a formula to it. There's always a structure, and we've been taught the formula of Gossip by from Gossip Girl itself, from the way that the episodes are written, more specifically from the way that the seasons are coordinated. Here, things don't necessarily fall perfectly in line in the formulaic way that we have come to expect them to. There are beginnings, middles, and ends to these arcs, but there's also something that is a little different. And I think that that different or new quality, a lot of people misunderstand for messiness because I've heard a lot of people criticize Gossip Girl for being a show that started out pretty good and then got messy along the way. No, it didn't get messy. The characters got more complicated. Their dynamic became more sophisticated. You keep laying these betrayals on top of each other. The betrayals mean more and mean different things because it's like a Russian doll of betrayals, a Russian doll of deceit. Gossip Girl didn't get messy. Gossip Girl, remember, is obsessed with the narrative as well as the meta narrative. The characters within the show, they got clingy. They got caught up in their emotions, as they should within a drama, within the narrative itself. The characters themselves got messy. So, what we're seeing from Gossip Girl season 4 is where the showrunners are willing to bite the bullet, instances where they aren't. Interestingly, Jenny Humphrey, who was, I think, the MVP of season 3, Jenny and Chuck Bass were the MVPs of season 3, certainly. She does come back, and her final appearance in the season finale of the third season, I thought was a fitting bon voyage. She was simultaneously being exiled from the narrative as well as she was finally escaping it. Like she was being liberated from it because it ruined her. She was the chosen one, and she just became the darkest and most twisted character. And that's what I got from her character. I loved Jenny Humphrey. She does come back in this season for like 3 or 4 episodes. I'm kind of confused about why the marketing insisted on Jenny so much, on Taylor Momsen so much, and I think she's great and cool and stuff. But like she was even involved in the starring role still. Like she still got credit, like opening credits, like throughout the entire season. And she was, like I said, only in maybe 4 or 5 episodes tops. And I did like seeing her, but that's a situation where I feel like Taylor probably wanted to leave the show to focus on her music, and the showrunners were actually trying to write her out of the show as well. But they had a few loose ends to tie up, a few more kind of twists and turns. Another punishment for Serena, committed by Vanessa, Jenny, and newcomer Juliet Sharp, who I thought Juliet Sharp was the best villain in this season. We had quite a few villains in this season, but I think Juliet Sharp was the most interesting one. I'll get into her in a second. Once I get off of this first thought that I'm having, uh, basically they wrote out Jenny. Jenny's last scene had to be with Blair because Blair and Jenny, their dynamic was always that kind of oppositional one. Um, Maybe there wasn't that kind of like emotional closure as it pertains to the meta narrative through her just saying goodbye to her family, to Dan and Lily and Rufus. I think she had to come back and say goodbye to Blair because we don't actually learn anything new about Jenny when she comes back. She just comes back and is like, "Hey, I just turned into the same manipulative person that I was. I have to leave again for the same exact reasons almost." But I find it interesting that it was Jenny, Vanessa, and Juliet who were involved in punishing Serena in the first half of the fourth season. Because Vanessa is a character who, unlike Jenny Humphrey, I loved her. Thought she was a great character. Vanessa, I was never completely sold on, and I don't think the show was completely sold on her. Like the narrative itself became sentient and would always reject Vanessa's advances to be incorporated within it. Like the narrative itself lashed out, but she was always an outsider. And the writers and the creators all definitely tried their best to have her gel, have her fit into this world. I mean, they coupled her up with Nate. They had her sleep with Chuck and like Dan. They tried everything they could. She was Hilary Duff's roommate for first part of season three. They did everything that they could to incorporate her into it, but she never actually fit. She was always the outsider. And in here, they kind of weaponized that quality where she is played as the scapegoat for a great amount of the season. She is written into the villain role and she's manipulated into playing the villain for so many other people's power plays. And at the very end, she takes Dan's novel that seems Fitzgerald-esque, seems almost Cocteau-esque, like The Miscreant or something, about his life on the inside, about how probably like thinly veiled satire or social commentary about Serena and Blair and Chuck and Nate and all the people that he's known. That he doesn't want to publish because it would ridicule and humiliate his subjects. Dan's interesting because I mean he's an artist looking in from the outside who was completely absorbed within the elitist sphere, the elitist group, and he's a painter who got too close to his subject, became a part of the art rather than an artist, And Vanessa's talking to him on the phone, and it's like, "You're so much better than these people," and she gets it published anonymously. Uh, Dan does not want this to happen. That's part of how the season ends. It's one of the cliffhangers. But Vanessa got to a point this season where she completely refused and rejected every single character because every single character, the narrative itself rejected her. And she knew she would never fit in, and my God, she tried so hard. And I thought, now we can get back to Juliet for a second. I thought it was very cool that it was Juliet, Vanessa, and Jenny who were um, conspiring, who enacted a pretty brutal punishment of Serena by playing around with her at a masquerade ball, which is slightly reminiscent of the first season with the masquerade ball where Nate kisses Jenny and believing that it's Serena. Like it's slightly reminiscent of that, but it's that weaponized. It's that kind of like innocent debauchery, if you will, that kind of oxymoron. It does make sense. It's not that contradictory. It's that weaponized. And each person gets to enact a certain amount of revenge, but Juliet takes it too far when she drugs Serena and gets her sent to a mental hospital. Juliet, I thought was really interesting because she is a townie. She is the townie weaponized. So who is the townie in Gossip Girl? Gossip Girl, we have to remember our framework is that our lives are gossip. Our lives are narrative. Narrative is not like natural to the human existence. Our memories are made up of gossip. We remember our lives episodically. Our lives are soap opera. Our lives are melodrama. And our lives are just ongoing. We remember them and we act out our lives uh, with television show motivation, right? We seek out the narratives that we want. And the antagonists of our lives are those whose narratives conflict with our own. So, who is the townie in this? The townie is the unseen damage. Juliet and her brother Ben. are the unseen damage. You can look at it hyper-politically, sure, and it's like the less fortunate being abused by the elite. I think that's just the upper crust, and I think that's barely cutting the surface. Let's go even deeper. We've all got townies, certain kinds of townies in our lives. I mean, hyper-political reason reading could also lead to the idea that we are townies too, watching this show and being abused by the situations in it. We've definitely been taken advantage of by the wealthy elite. But I'm not too interested in that. I'm interested in the idea that we all have townies. We all have these people that we have taken advantage of to varying degrees of unreasonable brutality. Like we've all been unreasonable to someone, and we might not even know that we were. We might have no idea. Someone might have been cruel to the townie of our narratives, at the behest of us or like on our behalf, but we had no idea they were doing it. They were doing it to either protect us, to motivate us, or to maybe even possibly harm us in the process. You don't know, but we all have a townie. We all have a Juliet. And I love that her name is Juliet. Juliet, the name itself is archetypal for female lead, for the lead woman. And she's coming in to insert herself into Serena's life with the sole purpose of destroying it by avenging, the unseen damage. Serena's glamorous narrative, like we saw her in season one coming back from boarding school, and it was the reason why she left that boarding school that the damage actually happened, right? Serena's mother wrongfully implicated Ben Donovan, Serena's teacher, uh, accused him of statutory rape, of sleeping with Serena, and even signed an affidavit with Serena's own signature on it, put him in jail for every season that we watched. So now we have to live with a certain kind of audience guilt, right? Because every season that we've enjoyed, this guy has been locked up for it. And since he's the reason why Serena is back in New York, we have also benefited from the punishment of the townie, from the sacrifice of the townie. The townie was sacrificed so that we could enjoy a greater design, a greater narrative. And Juliet is this wonderful avenging kind of archetype. And I loved seeing her. I thought Juliet was a lot more interesting than Ben. When Juliet left, Ben took center stage. And while Ben I thought was entertaining, Juliet was far more like she was actually spellbinding. I was spellbound by her several times. I thought she was really wicked, and I thought she was fascinating. MVP of this season goes to Blair Waldorf. Um, I thought her character was delightful, was wonderfully entertaining. Because she's a character who's always longed for a certain kind of fairy tale, right? And a fairy tale just kind of fell into her lap. I mean, she did some of the steps to get there. It's like all of her careful cultivation finally got her that perfect life, and it's killing her because the life that she loves most is the dreadful, doomed bad romance of Chuck Bass. I think she's figured out that she enjoys creating narratives rather than being swept away by one. But I think she's fascinating. Of course, it ends with her being pregnant, right? Most likely with Chuck's child, so I'm interested to see what goes on there. Chuck had a huge season. Oh my God, Chuck went through a lot. We had the whole Thorpe thing, which is wild. Which is wild. Uncle Jack comes back and actually partners up with Chuck. Crazy shit, but I am here for it. Um, there were a lot of fascinating philosophical impulses with Chuck. We saw the violence within Chuck as he punches a window above Blair's face while he's freaking out because she's picking the prince and not him. And I thought we were going to see another season where Chuck Bass fails. I thought it was going to be even worse than the ending of season three for Chuck. I thought we were going to see the season where Chuck Bass hit rock bottom and then went even further. But no, there's a kind of mature victory to Chuck Bass this time around. Whereas every other season, his character seemed to either deliberately regress into his archetype from the first season, or the pilot, I should remind you, in the pilot, he tried to rape two different women. He was a James Spader type of villain archetype. Josh Schwartz described him as being created to be pure evil. He's obviously transcended that. But each season seemed to end with him kind of regressing back to the archetype from the pilot. Season three, season one for sure ended this way. Him deliberately um, either avoiding change or regressing to that villainous archetype out of self-punishment. And I thought we were going to do that again here, right? But here we had that mature victory. So he actually accepts character growth because it's character growth in the form of tragedy. And it's necessary to his development. And I thought that was a really nuanced touch to Chuck. So we don't have to see him deformed and regressed after all this change from the season. I mean, that was fascinatingly done, but you can't see that happen again. And here it didn't. Here, even Nate is like, wow, you're mature. And he actually lets Blair go, and we see actual growth from Charles. We see growth from him. And of course, we also got that that crazy corporate espionage plot with him and his brother and Nate and Raina. Raina, I did like. Raina was a beautiful girl and a pretty cool character actually. Um, the Thorpe thing, I don't think it was saying a whole lot about Chuck's ideations of his father or living inside of his father's shadow. I think that more so what that was doing was challenging Chuck because you saw the trappings of tragedy. You know, like I thought Thorpe was gonna win. I didn't think I didn't think that Thorpe was going to um kill himself and Blair. Like I thought he was gonna win before that. You know, I thought that Chuck was going to lose it all. And I'm happy we didn't take that avenue because it's a more challenging one to have him be a mature Chuck rather than a resentful, loathsome, plotting one. I love both, but I haven't really been around mature Chuck, and I'm interested to see where which philosophical avenues we go down with him there. I think that ultimately the Thorpe thing was a thematic red herring. I mean, it was building narrative on the largest scale. I mean, you can definitely view it as Chuck viewing a narrative created by Thorpe and by his father, and pointing out the design flaws within it and exposing the truth, the morbid truth that's at its source. You know, that Thorpe killed his wife, and his Thorpe's wife was having an affair with Chuck's dad. You know, you can expose that truth. I mean, exposing the truth of narrative, but at the same time, it's inventing your own in the process. And it's not messy. It's just that there are so many threads that it's getting even more complicated to kind of navigate. But I really enjoy that. But ultimately, I think it was a thematic red herring, you know, because that is actually pretty easily dispatched. And that's not where the episode ends. So that's actually not where the episode was most focused, especially with Chuck and Blair's arc, because Chuck and Blair's arc ends with Chuck saying goodbye to Blair and Blair going to the prince with tears in her eyes. That is where the real moment was. You know, um, maybe it was a proving grounds as well. Chuck finally reaching that point of maturity, clearing his father's name and vanquishing the patriarchal challenger to his father's empire. That is all there. That's a thematic red herring. Um, I think we were supposed to see Chuck at his worst because Thorpe was, by investigating Avery Thorpe, Chuck was going down a spiral. And we'd seen that before and we knew it couldn't end well, but this time it did. So it inverted itself in a way that wasn't too sensationalist, in a way that was mature and kind of nuanced too, unexpected for sure. I did like a character it introduced near the very end, Charlie, or at least that's what her name was at first, right? Since we find out that her name is Ivy, and she's a con artist, and she just conned everybody, and it was immaculately well done. And my eternal crush, my girl Georgina Sparks, she saw the facade and she really appreciated it. And I think the cliffhanger I'm looking forward to most is her taking out that napkin with Georgina's phone number on it and giving her a call. Thought that was really cool. I like Ivy a lot. I like her voice is cool. You know, it's got an ever so slight rasp to it that I find kind of sexy. And I think her character is really devious and fun. And I think I see in her what Georgina sees in her. Something, an unknown variable, a wrecking ball, something that is dangerous in a world that is now seeming to be pretty well defined and comfortable. Gossip Girl can't let itself be that comfortable. So luckily we have Ivy. I liked Ivy. She was fun. She was very fun, but she's full of philosophical red herrings as you find yourself analyzing is being around these upper crust like elites, these ultra rich, wealthy and chic and beautiful people. Is that literally driving this girl to jump out of a window, driving her actually insane. Like, does she need to be medicated after being around all of these people? She even says to Dan, like when they're like about to have sex, she's like, "Call me Serena," and she's wearing Serena's dress, and she's such an imposter. But that's all a game. It's all a red herring. It's all a wild goose chase, a philosophical one. The writers are playing with us, or Ivy herself is playing with the meta narrative, because at the end, that was all a game, which is really telling me that season five is going to be full of these kinds of booby traps, right? And the booby traps that I love to fall into because I'll overthink Ivy, right? I'll overthink Charlie or Ivy, whoever the fuck she is. I will overthink it and then realize that it was all for naught. It was for nothing. And she made a mark of me too. She conned me just like she did everybody else. And I was, fuck, man, staring into the abyss until the abyss fucking giggled at me. Well, that's a Nietzschean fucking nightmare. And that's what Ivy is. And that's ultimately what Georgina is too. Georgina's a postmodern wrecking ball. And I'd be happy to see what Ivy and Georgina get up to. I think it'd be something fun. Dan, I think, is a really fascinating character. Dan is really, really cool. Um, I like the stuff that Vanessa says to him near the end. Like, you wanted to be in that group more than anyone, more than Jenny. And as I said earlier, Dan got too close to his muses, to the subjects of his art. He got too close to the art itself, that he incorporated himself within the art and chose existence over observation. He chose the art over the artist. Um, he got too lost within the meta narrative and chose the narrative. Like I think that Dan is fascinating because Dan obviously started off as a stand-in, as an analog for the audience. And I think the audience, just like Dan, fell into this universe and we don't want to leave it. And we choose the artificiality over the expose. Because, I mean, even we're smart enough to know that there's no difference, that both have narratives, that both are ultimately superficial, and that both are deliberately designed. I thought Gossip Girl season four was a fascinating season. Um, it's the weakest of the four that I've seen so far, but it's still a masterful season. Especially, I think in retrospect, it'll be very, very good because I think it's setting up where we can go in these seasons five and six. It's setting up where we can go, and it's introducing the viewer, it's introducing me to a new set of symbols, to a new rule book, to a new formula, to several new formulae. And it's telling me to get used to these and don't trust everything that we show you. We've taught you who to believe, and now we're going to invert that. Now we're going to expand it. Now we're going to forget it. We're going to speak new languages, and you're going to have to keep up. And if you can't keep up, then have fun getting tricked because I got tricked. Like I said, I really like the Ivy character because she tricked me into engaging on an analytical level, even though at the end there was no reason for me to devote that much of my mind to her because she was playing me. So Gossip Girl is saying we have a new rule book, we have a new formula, we have a new structure. Gossip is constantly evolving. Gossip is like fashion. It's one of the most important art forms on the planet, and one of its many qualities um, is the idea that gossip is always adapting and changing. The clothes that we wear, those change over time to reflect the current zeitgeist or the current ethos, right? Well, so does gossip. But gossip changes without anybody really realizing it. And I thought that that was the most effortlessly masterful thing that Gossip Girl season 4 did. It changed its own formula without me realizing that it was doing it until the end, until it was too late. And I went, "You guys got me, Stephanie Savage, Josh Schwartz. You guys tricked me." And that's cool. That's very cool. Very much so. Looking forward to season 5. I really hope you enjoyed my video about the fourth season of Gossip Girl. Yeah, another masterpiece. Great. It was great. We did some really cool aesthetic shit that really worked. The fashion was awesome. Um, yeah, the costume design was always on point. And yeah, but I think what impressed me most was the fact that the formula and the structure of the show that had changed this rhythm, had changed in its totality almost. And I I didn't realize it was happening, which means it was so effortless, it was so nuanced, and it was so designed. It's a beautiful design. And I think in future seasons, I'll realize how vital season 4 was because like I said, it introduced a new set of symbols, and I can't wait to familiarize myself with them. Gossip Girl is still the best teen show I've ever seen. And at this point, four masterful seasons down, I I I don't see it being beaten unless seasons 5 and 6 are literally awful. That's the only way. It's the only way that I could change my mind on that. Because Gossip Girl has not only blown my mind, it's outsmarted me. It intellectually outpaced me. But now I'm ready for you. I'm on to you. New tricks. But I adore you. I adore you for defeating your cult boyfriend because that's what I want. That's what I want from teen drama, to be defeated by it. And season 4 of Gossip Girl absolutely did that. So thanks. XOXO.